Hello everyone, I hope everybody's fine. Welcome to the academic year 2020-2021. I just hope that this year will be better than last year and we'll be able to go through the program in better conditions. I'm Professor Adlani Nait Ibrahim. I'm your teacher of this module entitled Issues in Culture. The first part of this module has a subtitle, which is History Making Thoughts, Insights into Seminal Concepts in Cultural Studies. First, issues in culture. This module that we thought is important for you, fifth year students, is going to tackle, as the title indicates, issues, notions, ideas that are part of what we call cultural studies. Languages grow within environments, and these languages influence these environments within which they grow, and these environments also influence languages. So there is a two-direction relationship and influence between these two notions, culture and language. And in order to really master a language, in order to really understand the functioning of a language, we need also to have a picture, a clear picture of the environment within which this language grows. And this is what we do in such modules such as civilization and literature. But what we're going to be addressing in this particular module, we're going to go beyond the language itself and beyond the environment within which the language that we study, that is here English, grows. And we're going to talk about cultures in general, some aspects of cultures in general. And when we speak about these issues in culture, we can take, for example, religion. Religion is a very important cultural phenomenon. Why cultural? Because although sometimes religion goes beyond the culture, for instance, you have, if you take Islam, is a religion that is practiced in Algeria and Saudi Arabia, though these two countries have two different cultures. You have Islam that is also practiced in Russia. You have Islam in countries like, for instance, Kyrgyzstan. Why these countries have nothing to do, culturally speaking. Still, that practice of religion in Kyrgyzstan, in Russia, and in Algeria, though it is referred to as one religion, still it is practiced differently. There are things of that religion. Do you have an approach to that religion which is different whether you are in Russia, in Algeria, or in China? So why? Why does this happen? Why we people, though we tend or we believe and we pretend that we believe in the same thing and that we are practicing the same thing, still we practice that thing differently. We have some common things, we do some things in the same way, still we do many other things to which we refer using the same word, the same concept, the same notion, still differently. So there is some distinction without a difference. And sometimes there is a distinction and a difference. Why does it happen this way? Why sometimes we believe in different religions, still we do things the same way. Why, for instance, we have common things. We have social media, for instance. We have social media, which is also a cultural phenomenon, a new cultural phenomenon, which belongs to uh, roughly the 21st century. And still, we have a different approach to those social media. And we have a different approach to the way we use them and how we use them. And the presence of social media in a particular society is going to induce phenomena, is going to induce comportments, behaviors that in one country, in one culture, that are different from this phenomena and comportments and behaviors in a different community. Why is there that such a difference? Though it's the same thing to which we refer with the expression social media. Democracy. Democracy is one word. But if you go to France, if you go to the United States, if you go to Britain, the practice of democracy is totally different. If you take secularism, that separation between religion and the state, for instance. Although in the same continent where it used to be, where it started to be practiced, it from the beginning, the practice of secularism was different, although we refer to it as a phenomenon, as a practice with the same word, which is secularism. But British secularism is different from German secularism, is different from French secularism, and is different from American secularism. Totally. Though we refer to that using exactly the same word. Why does this happen? Why do we consider some people as different to us? Why do we consider some people as enemies and others as friends? Sometimes and often we don't know these people and we don't know much about these people, but still we consider them as friends, as allies, and others as enemies. And then when we get to know one of them, either we change our minds or we keep the same opinion. Why does this happen? All this happens because there is an environment, there is a culture within which we grow, and these cultures, these environments have an impact on us, and we have an impact on these environments because we also change them over time, depending, of course, on the individuals, because some people have more influence on their communities and societies than others. Still, as individuals, we all contribute to the making of these environments, to the making of these cultures, which in turn also in return also have an influence on us. Now, these are the issues that we will be addressing, and as a first part of this module, we're going to emphasize on some thoughts, some history making thoughts, that is, thoughts, ideas, notions that made history, that influenced the course of history and changed humanity. So, and this is going to be through a number of concepts. One of them is, for instance, otherness. Otherness, that is the relationship to the other being the person, the community, the nation, a group of human beings that is different from us, uh, because they have a different religion, because they have different culture, because they have different principle, because they have a different complexion. So the other, the definition of the other changes from one individual to another, from one country to another. Now, uh, other concepts like representation, that is the way we see things, the way we see individuals, also is going to be very important, and the change in representations changed also history. So these aspects will be addressed in this module in order to allow us, as language students to have a wider view of cultural issues, a wider view of the world, because we're not here to learn English only. We are here also to be intellectuals, to be able to have a reflection. And in this module, we're going to try and have tools, and the tools are the concepts in order to understand the world, in order to understand relationships, in order to understand human relationships. I know that some of you will raise the question, is that important? Is that important to us as teachers of English, as English teachers at high school? Probably, if you think that your job is to go to your classroom, teach children, teach young adults how to speak English, to teach them the words, to teach them the grammar, probably this is not important. But if you consider yourself as an educator, if you consider yourself that what you will be teaching, transmitting to your students, to your pupils, is more than a language, but as a view of the world, is an education, is answers to some questions, is introducing your children, your pupils to facing the world, to facing issues in the world, to facing problems in the world, to reflecting on the world, to understanding the world. If you consider your job as such, this module is certainly important to you and is going to be helpful, because it is going to help you reflect on yourself too, on who you are, on your contribution to the world, and as a person, and as a Muslim, as an individual, as an Algerian, as an African, and as a woman or as a man, and more importantly, as a teacher. Because the teacher is not there only to teach the subject, it is also there to provide the pupils, the students, with tools to face the world. This is what I believe is the importance of this subject, of this module. Of course, this will be accompanied with a document that will retell some of the issues I've discussed right now. It's going to set the objectives of the module, the methodology, and in this document you will find also, as for those who were with me last year, the marking scheme and the marking criteria, and it will also provide a bibliography that contains books. Many of the books are available on the internet through the different websites where you can download books. Some of them are available in our library, but in any case, this bibliography is meant to just provide you with some titles, with some indication to of what you could read to have a better understanding, and even go beyond, far beyond the this presentation here, and the module as a whole, and the program as a whole. Right, now we're going to move to the second slide to address the main important point of this first part of the lecture. Right. As you can see on this slide
I'd like
two,
to begin
the specific
here,
title
with
of
these two
this first part of
quotes
the lecture
that
is
belong
Local
to
Cultures,
Jean-Paul
Universal
Sartre, the French
Civilization, e
philosopher.
pluribus unum.
E pluribus
In
unum is a
view of
Latin expression that means
of his books. out,
I don't know if
one
you're
out
familiar
of many.
with Jean-Paul Sartre.
And I
20th
use this
century
Latin expression to
philosopher.
illustrate
He's a
actually
Marxist, and
the first part of the
he
title,
local cultures, universal civilization, which
discussed in his
means
books
a
the
very
following
important issue,
idea, which
which
I would like
is the
to
just human
emphasize in this
relations
lecture, and
and
which, of course, you
the
can
relations between cultures
oppose,
and the
you
relations between human
have
beings, and how
all
each culture sees the
approaches
other,
to
and
cultures
how
and
each culture,
civilization, and
the
many
concept
scholars
that will be
think
used is actually
that we
how
have
each culture
many civilizations, and we've
represents
had
the other.
many
That is
civilizations,
how
and then in
uh,
one
in a
particular epoch
culture
you can have different
individuals
civilizations
perceive
coexisting.
the
The idea that
others
I'm
that
trying
they
to
think
advance
have
here
a
is
different culture, a
that
different way of life,
actually there is
different
in
values.
one epoch, in one
And Jean-Paul Sartre wrote
span
on
of
these
time, there is
these
one
issues,
civilization,
and
one human
in No
civilization,
Exit, one of
to
his
which
books,
different
he writes, as you
peoples,
can see, he has
nations,
like three.
countries
Hell
contribute,
is the other.
and we have local cultures, and that is
Hell
in
is
each
the other,
country, for
and
each people, for each
this
nation,
is a formulation
there
of
is
how
a
one
specific
particular
culture, and sometimes
representation
even
can
a number of
subsist
cultures
in the
coexisting within one
minds of
geographical space.
a people,
We'll see
a
this in
nation,
clearer terms
in relation to
later on.
another one with which
But
they
the
don't
main idea
share the
which I'd
same
like
culture,
you
that they
to
see that the
bear
negative
in mind
aspect
here
in the other.
is what we
So
will be discussing
what
is
is
this
not
idea that
us
although
is
we
bad,
have different
we
cultures,
are the good,
and that
and
means
they
that we
are
have
the
different
bad.
ways of
We are the
dealing
norm,
with
and they
things,
are
with the
the
daily things in life.
abnormal.
We have
We are
different
the
values,
reference,
we
and
have
they
different
are
norms, we have different
the
ways of life.
odd one out,
Yet
the
we still
black sheep.
share many things
That is,
as
this
nations,
is
as peoples, that
an
make us
illustration
one,
of what we call
actually
in
one
culture
human
studies
kind, one human
ethnocentrism.
race.
Ethnocentrism, ethnocentrism.
Right.
Ethnocentrism, you have this
As you can see on this
concept
slide
composed,
2,
or this word
the
composed
specific
of
title
two
of
parts.
this first part of
Ethno
the
comes
lecture
from ethnic,
is
that is
local
a
cultures,
group of
universal
people
civilization, a
sharing the
pluribus
same
unum. A
culture,
pluribus unum is
and
a Latin
centrism,
expression
center,
that means
that is a people who think that
out,
their culture,
one out
their
of
way of
many.
life,
And
they are
I used
the
this
center
Latin
of the world.
expression
They
to
are the
illustrate
reference.
actually
If you are
the
not
first part of
like
the
us,
title, local
you
cultures,
are
universal
different,
civilization,
and you are
which
abnormal.
means the
And that's why
following
sometimes when we see
idea,
things
which
happening
I would like
elsewhere
to
or before our
emphasize
eyes,
in this lecture,
and we think
and
that
which, of course,
it's
you
not
can
the way we would do it,
oppose,
it's not the way
you
we think it's
have
right. So we think
all
that this is
approaches
abnormal,
to cultures and
and it goes
civilization,
as
and
far as
many
sometimes
scholars
rejecting
think
it, and
that
sometimes
we
condemning it,
have
and
many
sometimes even
civilizations,
being
and we've
violent
had many
to it.
civilizations, and then
And
in
we
one
could
particular
exercise
epoch you can
all
have different civilizations
types of
coexisting. The idea that I'm trying
actions,
to
negative
advance
actions
here
against this
is
particular behavior or
that
idea or
actually there is in
issue.
one epoch, in
So
one
this is what Jean-Paul Sartre
span of time,
expresses here. That is,
there is
we have
one
this
civilization, one human
first
civilization,
way of looking at
to
what
which
is not us.
different
That is
peoples,
that
nations,
view
countries
that the
contribute,
other is
and we have local cultures,
and hell,
and that is in each
course,
country,
based
for
on
each people, for each nation.
the three
There is a specific
monotheist
culture, and
religions,
sometimes even a number of
represents
cultures
all what
coexisting
is
within one
negative, all what
geographical
is
space. And we'll see
unwanted
this in clearer terms later
in
on.
us.
But the main
the same
idea which I'd
Sartre,
like you to
in Being and Nothingness,
bear in mind
another
here
book,
is what we will
writes
be
the
discussing
following:
is this
I
idea
can
that
know
although
myself
we
only
have
through
different
the
cultures,
mediation of the
and
other.
that means that we have
So
different
here,
ways of
the other
dealing
is
with
viewed
things, with the
differently.
daily things in life. We
The
have
other is
different
not
values,
seen
we have
as
different norms,
a
we have
negative
different
being,
ways of life,
as
yet we
something
still
that we
share
should
many things as
put a
nations, as
distance
peoples,
with,
that make us
and
one,
something that we
actually
should
one
reject.
human
The
kind,
other
one
actually
human
is very
race.
important to us. those who are different from
Right.
us are important because they help us.
As you can see on this
They help
slide,
us
slide 2,
understand
the
ourselves,
specific title of
have a
this
clear
first part
perception
of
of
the
ourselves,
lecture
have
is
a
local
true
cultures, universal
representation of
civilization,
ourselves.
e
It
pluribus
means
unum.
that we
E
cannot
pluribus
live
unum is a
without the
Latin
other.
expression that means
Yes, we are different, but we can
out,
coexist, and we
one
have
out
to
of many.
coexist.
And
Coexistence
I
here
use this
is
Latin
very
expression
important.
to
In the
illustrate
first
actually
view,
the
first
first part of the
perception,
title,
in the
local
first
cultures, universal
representation of
civilization,
the other,
which
it is hell,
means
it is
the
negative,
following
it is to be
idea, which I would
rejected.
like
In the
to
second
emphasize in
representation,
this lecture,
the
and
other
which of course
is
you
part
can
of us. It is
oppose,
important
and
to us.
you
And
have all
these two representations, these
approaches
two
to cultures
perceptions
and
of the other,
civilization,
have
and many
always
scholars
been
think that
coexisting
we have
together.
many
That
civilizations,
is,
and we've
we
had many
often
civilizations, and then
we
in one
either
particular epoch you can have different civilization
adhere,
coexisting.
the idea that I'm trying to advance
use
here
the first
is
representation
or the other,
that
and sometimes
actually there is
the same person can
in
have
one
two
epoch, in
attitudes
one
towards the other,
span of
depending on the
time,
context, depending on the
there is one
circumstances.
civilization, one
So
human
these two
civilization,
aspects
to which
of
different
human life
peoples, nations,
coexist
countries
within
contribute,
one individual,
and
within
we
one
have
culture.
local
And this
cultures, and
is
that is in
has
each
accompanied
country,
the life of
for each
cultures
people,
and the
for each
relationship between
nation.
cultures and the relationship
There
between
is a
nations and
specific
the
culture,
relationship
and
between
sometimes even
individuals.
a number of cultures
Now,
coexisting within one geographical
this is
space.
what we're going to see
We'll see
later,
this in clearer
how we
terms
come to develop
later on.
these two
But the main
representations,
idea
how we
which I'd
come
like
to
you
develop
to
these two
bear in
perceptions
mind
of the
here
other.
is
And
what we
the
will
other
be
here,
discussing is this idea that although
we'll see
we
also
have different
what it
cultures,
means.
and that
Is the
means that
other
we have different ways
somebody
of
who is
dealing
far
with
from us,
things,
who
with the
lives in
daily
another
things in
country,
life.
who belongs to a
We
different
have
culture?
different values, we have different
Or can
norms,
the other
we
be
have different ways
somebody
of life,
who is part
yet
of
we
our
still
nation, part of
share
our
many
culture,
things
part of
as
our
nations, as
environment,
peoples,
not
that
only
make us the country,
one, but
actually
sometimes
one
even
human
the neighborhood,
kind,
and
one
sometimes
human
even the family.
race.
That is, the other can sometimes be
Right, the foreigner, as you can see on this
but
slide,
it can
slide
also
2,
be
the specific
local,
title of
somebody
this
who lives
first part of
within the
the
same
lecture
country as yours.
is local cultures,
That
universal
is a fellow
civilization, e
countryman.
pluribus unum. E pluribus
And
unum is
sometimes
a
this
Latin
other
expression that
can
means
be your neighbor.
out,
And sometimes this
one
other
out of
can
many.
be your brother, your
And
sister,
I
your
use
father,
this
your
Latin
mother.
expression to
So
illustrate
it
actually
depends on
the first part of the
circumstances,
title, local
and it
cultures,
depends
universal
how you
civilization,
view and the
which
issue that you are
means
trying to
the following
establish
idea, which I would like
when you are
to
dealing
emphasize in this
people.
lecture, and which of course you
In the
can
next slide, we're going to see
oppose,
how
and
this
you
comes
have all
into being, how we can
approaches
develop these
to cultures and
representations, whether
civilization,
they
and
are negative
many scholars
or
think
positive.
that we have many civilizations, and
Right,
we've had many
this view
civilizations,
of
and
the
then
other, of
in
the
one
world, these
particular epoch you
representations
can
that human
have
beings
different
develop,
civilization
and
coexisting.
that make
The
up
idea
their
that
own
I'm
culture,
trying to advance here is
actually stem
that
out of what
actually there is
Yuri Bronfenbrenner,
in
a
one
social
epoch,
and
in
clinical
one
psychologist,
span of time,
who
there is one
developed a
civilization, one
theory in the
human civilization,
1970s,
to
1979,
which different
that he
peoples,
called
nations,
the
countries
ecological
contribute.
systems. And we
As you
have
see
local
here on slide number
cultures, and
4,
that is
in each country,
it is the
for each
individual's
people, for each
development
nation,
within the
there
context of
is
the
a
system of
specific culture,
relationships
and
that form
sometimes
his
even
or
a
her
number of
environment.
cultures coexisting within one
What
geographical
Bronfenbrenner
space.
We'll
tries
see this
to
in clearer
advance
terms
is
later on.
this idea
But
that
the main idea which
human
I'd like you
development
to
is subjected to a
bear in
number
mind
of
here is what we
circumstances,
will be
to
discussing is
a
this idea that
context, to an
although we have
environment.
different cultures,
And this
and that
environment
means
is
that we have
very
different ways
complex. That
of
is when we
dealing with
try to
things, with the daily
understand
things in
the
life. We
individuals,
have
their
different
behavior,
values,
their
we have different
actions,
norms, we have
their
different ways of life, yet
psyche.
we still
It
share
is
many
always
things
complex. It is a
as nations,
complex
as
phenomenon.
peoples,
When a
that
human
make
being
us
does
one,
something,
actually
says
one
something,
human
believes in
kind, one
something,
human
it is not
race.
easy to actually find the cause, the reason
Right.
that brought that person to do or to say or to
As you can see
think
on this slide 2,
what they
the
do,
specific
say,
title
or think.
of this first
It
part
is
of
subjected
the
to a
lecture
number of reasons,
is
to a
Local Cultures,
complex
Universal
environment.
Civilization, e
And
pluribus unum.
this
E
means,
pluribus unum
by
is a
extension,
Latin
that
expression
the
that means
culture itself is when we go out of the
out,
individual and we
one
extend to
out
the
of
whole
many.
community, to the
And
whole
I
country, or
used
to the
this
whole
Latin
nation.
expression to
Understanding
illustrate
their
actually
culture
the
is a very
first part of the
complex
title,
issue
Local Cultures, Universal
because it is
Civilization,
born and it
which
develops, it grows within a
means
very
the following
complex
idea,
context.
which I
And
would
this
like
context is
to
what
emphasize in this lecture,
Bronfenbrenner
and which, of course,
calls
you can
the ecological systems.
oppose, and
That is an
you
environment which is
have
composed of
all approaches to
a
cultures
number
and
of environments
civilization, and
that he presents
many
as
scholars
layers.
think that
And this is
we
what
have many
we'll
civilizations and
see
we've
in
had
the next
many
slide
civilizations,
through
and then in one particular
a
epoch
graph.
you can have different civilization coexisting. The idea that
Well,
I'm
I mean
trying
diagram
to advance here
that you
is
can see here
that
on slide number
actually there
5.
is,
So this is what
in one epoch, in
Yuri
one
Bronfenbrenner calls
span
the
of time,
ecological systems. You
there
see
is
here
one
we have
civilization, one
the
human
individual
civilization,
in the
to
middle, the
which
center
different
of the
peoples,
diagram,
nations,
and the
countries
individual is
contribute,
surrounded by
and we have
layers.
local
You see here
cultures, and
1,
that is
2,
in
3,
each
4,
country, for
and
each
5.
people, for each
The
nation.
fifth one here
There is a
in,
specific
in
culture,
green,
and
which
sometimes even
gives
a
actually the
number of
3D
cultures coexisting within one
view
geographical
of
space.
the diagram
We'll see this
chrono
in
system.
clearer terms
Let's start with
later on.
first
But the
the
main idea
individual.
which
And
I'd
when we
like
say
you
here the
to
individual, it's very
bear in
important
mind
to
here
bear in
is what we
mind
will
that
be
we're
discussing
speaking
is this
here
idea
about the
that
individual at
although we
different
have different cultures,
ages. That is,
and that means that we have
it
different
can be
ways
the
of
child, the
dealing
baby,
with things, with the daily things in life.
who grows
We
and then
have
becomes a
different
child, and then
values, we have
a
different
teenager,
norms,
and then
we have different ways
a
of
young
life,
person, and then the
yet we
adult.
still
So
share many
here you
things
see in the center, the
as
circle, the
nations,
first
as
circle, the
peoples,
individual
that make us
with
one, actually
their
one
characteristics,
human
his or
kind,
her
one human
characteristics,
race.
sex, age, etc., health, etc. That is
Right.
the individual, and that's why you remember we said
As you can see on this
in
slide,
slide
slide
number
2,
4,
the
that
specific title
it's
of
written
this
there. You can
first
go
part
back there
of
and see
the
it.
lecture
That
is
the
Local
ecological
Cultures,
systems,
Universal
this
Civilization,
concept has
e
been
pluribus unum.
renamed the
E pluribus unum is a Latin
bio-ecological
expression that means
systems. Why bio? Because there was
out,
also an
one
integration of
out
the
of many.
biology of the
And
person. That is
I used this Latin
the
expression
individual's
to
sex, the
illustrate
individual's
actually
age, the
the first
individual
part of the title, Local
health,
Cultures, Universal
physical health,
Civilization, which
whether they are physically
means
impaired or
the
not,
following
the age, whether
idea,
they are
which I would like to emphasize in this
a
lecture, and
teenager
which of
or
course
an
you can
adult or an old person.
oppose,
This
and
also has a
you
great
have
influence on their
all
personality and then on
approaches
their
to cultures and
socialization. Because what we're
civilization, and
speaking about
many
here, we're
scholars
speaking
think
about the
that we
socialization of the
have many
individual, how the
civilizations, and we've
individual
had many
becomes a member
civilizations, and then
of the
in one
society, a
particular
member
epoch you can
of the
have different
community, and then
civilization
how this
coexisting.
individual is
The idea
going
that
to
I'm trying to advance
absorb
here
the
is
culture
that
of their environment,
actually there is
how they are going to
in
react
one
to that
epoch, in
culture,
one
how they are going to
span of time,
interpret that culture,
there
how
is
they are going
one
to
civilization, one
integrate the
human
representations of
civilization
that culture in
to
relationship
which
to
different
the other cultures. You remember
peoples,
first,
nations, countries
the third slide when we
contribute,
spoke about Jean-Paul
and
Sartre
we
and the
have
other, that
local
is
cultures,
those
and that is
who
in each country,
do not have the same
for
culture,
each
or
people, for
those who
each
are
nation,
within the same culture but
there
that
is
we
a
consider as
specific
individuals,
culture, and sometimes
as
even
the
a
other,
number
those
of
who are
cultures
not like
coexisting
us,
within
or
one
those who are not like
geographical
me.
space.
So this individual,
We'll see this in clearer
with
terms
his or her
later on.
biology, that has a
But
very
the main
important
idea
role,
which
because,
I'd like
for
you
instance,
to
being
bear in mind here
10
is
or being
what we will
15
be
or being
discussing is
20
this idea that although
is
we have different cultures,
entails that there's
and
going
that
to be
means
a
that we
difference
have
in the way
different
you
ways
can
of
react
dealing
to
with
a
things, with
particular
the daily
value,
things in
to
life,
a particular
we
behavior,
have
to a
different
particular
values, we
scene
have
or
different norms,
an
we have
idea.
different ways of life.
So age is very
Yet
important.
we
Sex
still
also is very important,
share
whether you're a
many
man or
things
a woman, and how
as
men and
nations,
women
as
are
peoples,
actually considered
that
in one
make us
particular culture
one,
is going to
actually
determine
one
also
human
your personality and
kind,
the way
one
you're going
human
to
race.
socialize in that particular community. Your health state also
Right.
is very important. If you are physically impaired, if you are
As you can see
blind,
on
if you
this
are
slide,
deaf, if
slide
you are
2,
dumb, if you
the specific title
you
of
are
this
physically
first
impaired,
part of
you're going
the
to
lecture
also
is local
be
cultures,
treated
universal
in a way or in
civilization,
a different
e
way,
pluribus
and you're
unum.
going to
E
react to
pluribus
things, you're
unum
going
is
to
a
integrate
Latin
things
expression that
differently.
means
So the biology of the individual
one
is very
out of
important
many.
in determining
And I
the
use this
personality
Latin
and in
expression
determining
to
the
illustrate
culture
actually
that you're
the
going
first
to
part of the
integrate
title,
and how
local
you're going to
cultures,
contribute
universal
to that
civilization,
same culture, which will,
which
because of your contribution, is going
means
to
the
evolve, it's going
following
to change.
idea, which I
Now,
would like
the individual
to
with
emphasize in
their
this lecture,
biology
and which of
is
course
within
you can
the first environment,
pose,
the immediate
you
environment, the first
have
layer that is
all
referred to here
approaches
as
to
the
cultures and
microsystem.
civilization,
And then beyond
many
that, and
scholars
within that
think
microsystem, you have
that
the family,
we
health,
have many
church,
civilizations, and
neighborhood.
we've
We're going to
had
see that
many
in the next
civilizations, and
slide.
then
And then
in one
above
particular epoch
that
you can have
layer,
different
you have the
civilization
mesosystem,
coexisting.
which is
The idea that I'm
actually
trying to
not
advance here is
an environment in itself, but
that
actually the
actually there
result
is
or the relationship
in one
between the
epoch,
different
in one
microsystems. You see here in the
span of
microsystem,
time,
you have different
there is one
microsystems. You have the
civilization,
family.
one
This
human
is the first
civilization
immediate
to
environment
which
within which
a
the child,
different
the individual
peoples,
grows and
nations,
develops,
countries
the family. And you
contribute,
have also another
and we
microsystem,
have
which is the
local
school.
cultures,
You
and that
have
is
another
in
one,
each
which is
country,
the health
for each
services, that
people,
is
for
the
each
hospital
nation.
where you
There
go,
is
where you
a
are
specific
taken,
culture,
and also
and sometimes
those
even
institutions
a
that
number of cultures coexisting
take
within
care
one
of your health. So
geographical space.
your neighborhood. So
We'll
these
see
are
this
the
in
different
clearer
microsystems
terms
within which
later on.
the person
But the
develops,
main
within
idea
which the
which I'd
person
like you to
lives, and the relationship
bear
between
in
these
mind here
microsystems
is
actually
what we will
give
be
us what
discussing is this idea that
Bronfman
although we
calls the
have different
mesosystem.
cultures,
So
and that
it's
means
not
that we
actually
have
an
different
environment in
ways
itself,
of
but it is the result
dealing
of the
with
relationship
things,
between
with
the
the
different
daily things in
microsystems.
life.
And then comes
We
the
have different
exosystem, and
values,
then
we
the
have
larger one,
different
the
norms,
macro
we have
system. We're
different
going to
ways
see
of
each
life,
one
yet
individually.
we still
And
share
all of
many
this
things
is actually
as nations, as
influenced
peoples,
by one
that
larger
make us
system, which
one,
is not again
actually one
an environment
human
in itself, but rather
kind,
a
one
sort
human
of
race.
transversal
Right.
system with a chrono system, that is time.
As you can see on
Time
this
and
slide, slide 2, the specific
epoch within
title
which
of
you
this
live,
first
whether you
part
live in
of
the 19th century, in
lecture
20th century, you
is
live in
local
time of
cultures,
war, or
universal
this
civilization.
also
E pluribus unum. E
changes
pluribus unum
things.
is a
We're
Latin
going to see
expression that
each one
means
of these layers,
out,
each one of these
one out of
environments
many.
individually,
And I
starting
use
from
this
the
Latin
next
expression
slide.
to illustrate actually
Fine.
the first part of the title,
Now,
local
the
cultures, universal
first
civilization,
system,
which
the first ecological system,
means
is
the
that
following
immediate environment within which
idea, which
the
I would like
individual
to
grows.
emphasize in this lecture,
That
and which of
environment
course you can
within which the individual
pose,
establishes
you
their first
have
relationships.
all and that
approaches
is the
to
microsystem.
cultures and
And as
civilization,
explained
and
here,
many scholars
and
think
this is of course
that
taken
we
from
have many
Burke,
civilizations, and we've
this
had
is the
many
layer closest
civilizations, and
to
then
the child
in one
or the
particular
individual
epoch
and
you can
contains the
have different
structures
civilization
with
coexisting.
which the child has
The idea that
direct
I'm
contact.
trying to advance
And
here
the
is
microsystem encompasses
that
the relationships and
actually there is in
interactions a
one
child has
epoch,
with
in
her
one
or his immediate
span of time,
surroundings.
there
That
is
is,
one
as a
civilization,
child,
one human
you
civilization,
have your first relationships
to
with your mother,
which
with your
different peoples,
father, your
nations,
parents, your
countries
siblings,
contribute.
brothers and sisters,
And we
and
have
then
local cultures, and
when
that
you
is
grow
in
a
each
little bit,
country,
you have
for each
neighbors.
people, for
You
each
then you
nation.
start going to
There is
school, and you
a
have that
specific
relationships with
culture,
your
and sometimes
teachers,
even
with your
a number of
classmates.
cultures coexisting within one
As a child, you're taken to
geographical
hospital,
space.
you have health
We'll
services
see
that take
this
care
in
of
clearer
you,
terms
so you
later on.
establish these relationships with these
But the
people.
main
So
idea which
all
I'd like
these
you
actually
to
have an impact
bear
on
in
the
mind
individual
here is
and
what we will be
influence
discussing is
the
this idea that
personality
although
and
we
influence
have
the
different
way you
cultures,
start seeing
and that
things.
means that
And the
we have
more you
different ways
grow, the
of
more
dealing
these
with things,
environments
with the daily things in
have
life.
an
We
impact on
have
you, and you
different
also have
values,
an
we have
impact on
different
these
norms,
environments, of
we have
course,
different
because
ways of life,
why these
yet we
environments
still
tend to
share
change
many
over
things
time. It's because
as nations,
individuals
as
also
peoples,
change these
that make
environments
us one,
by
actually
influencing
one
the
human
functioning of these
kind, one
environments, and when
human
providing new
race.
ideas, new values, new ways of seeing things.
Right.
So the first
As you can
environment
see on
that
this
help
slide,
you
slide
that
2,
helps
the
you
specific title
socialize
of
is
this
that
first part of
microsystem,
the lecture
and this microsystem
is Local
is going
Cultures,
to
Universal
determine to
Civilization,
some
e pluribus
extent,
unum.
of course,
E
not
pluribus unum
solely
is a Latin
and not
expression that
wholly,
means
but partly, to a
out,
certain extent,
one out of
your
many.
personality and
And
your
I use this
integration
Latin
within
expression
the
to
culture
illustrate
within
actually
which you
the first
grow.
part of the title, Local Cultures, Universal Civilization,
Next
which
is the mesosystem.
means
The
the
mesosystem, as I
following
said earlier,
idea,
is
which
actually
I would
the
like
relationship,
to emphasize
the
in this lecture,
result
and
of the
which, of course,
relationship,
you can
the relationships in plural,
oppose, and
between the
you
different
have
layers of
all
the micro system,
approaches
that is
to
the different
cultures and
microsystems.
civilization, and
As you can
many
see here
scholars
on
think
slide number
that
7,
we
it
have
is a
many
layer that provides
civilizations
the
and we've
connection
had
between the
many
structures of the
civilizations, and then
child's
in
or the
one
individuals.
particular
Always
epoch you
remember
can
that we're
have
talking about the
different
child
civilization
here, but
coexisting.
actually it applies
The idea
also
that
to
I'm
the
trying
individual
to
at different
advance
ages.
here
Remember the
is
characteristics, the biology
that
of the individual. That
actually there
is
is
what these
in one
environments
epoch, in
have
one
in terms of
span of
influence and
time,
impact on the individual
there is
when
one
they are
civilization, one human
children.
civilization,
It
to
all
which
also continues
different
over time
peoples,
as they
nations,
grow.
countries
So examples
contribute,
here, the connection
and
between
we
the
have
child's
local
teacher
cultures,
and
and that
his
is in
parents.
each country,
That relationship
for
is very
each people, for
important
each
and has
nation.
an influence on the
There is
individual's
a
personality, on the child's
specific culture,
personality, and in the
and
child's
sometimes even a number of
socialization.
cultures
Whether
coexisting within
the
one
parents, for instance, go
geographical
to see the
space.
teacher when
We'll
from
see
time to
this in
time
clearer
to
terms
inquire about their
later on.
child.
But the main
Whether
idea
if
which I'd
the
like you
teacher
to
behaves in a way or another towards
bear in
the
mind
child, and the
here
child tells the
is what we
parents,
will
whether the
be
parents are
discussing
going
is
to
this idea
go
that
and
although we
talk it
have
over
different
with
cultures,
the teacher
and
or
that
not.
means that we have different
Whether they
ways of
are whether they
dealing
consider
with
that the teacher
things,
is
with
very
the daily
important and
things in
that their
life.
child has
We
to
have
listen to their
different
teacher's advice,
values, we have
or
different
whether the
norms,
teacher
we have
represents
different
some
ways
authority
of
which
life,
parents accept or not.
yet we
And the
still
same thing
share many
of the
things
teacher, the way
as
they see
nations, as
the
peoples,
parents.
that
So
make us
this
one,
relationship is very
actually one
important and has
human
an impact on children.
kind, one
You see
human
that children, for instance,
race.
do not view the teacher in the same way, and when their
Right.
parents do not have the same relationships with As you can see
teacher.
on
You
this
can see a
slide,
child
slide
that
2,
sort have
the specific title
considers the
of
teacher
this
as a
first
very
part of
important
the lecture
authority and a reference,
is Local
because their
Cultures,
parents
Universal
say
Civilization,
this
e
and say that
pluribus
you have
unum.
to listen to
E
your teachers.
pluribus unum is
Your
a
teachers'
Latin expression that means
thoughts are important. Their advice
one
is
out of many.
important. You have to respect your
And
teacher,
I
whether
used
you
this
would
Latin
have
expression
a
to
different
illustrate
behavior
actually
from a
the first
child
part of the title, Local
whose
Cultures,
parents
Universal
have a different
Civilization,
view of the
which
school, of the role of the
means
teacher, for
the
instance.
following
Here,
idea, which I
the
would
other
like
example is
to emphasize in this
the
lecture,
relationship
and which, of
between, for
course,
instance, the
you can
church and the neighborhood.
oppose.
Here,
You
Bronfenbrenner
have
and
all
Burke refer to the church,
approaches to
but of
cultures and
course, the
civilization,
church,
and
it applies
many
also to
scholars
mosque
think
or to
that we
any
have many
other
civilizations and we've had many
representation of
civilizations, and
any
then
other
in
religious
one particular
institution.
epoch
That
you can
is
have
the
different
role
civilization
of that
coexisting.
religious
The
institution of
idea that
religion
I've been
in the
trying to
environment, and
advance
how
here is
the
that
role and the
actually
function
there
and the
is
importance it has
in one
within that
epoch, in
environment.
one span of
This is
time,
going also to
there is one
influence
civilization, one human
child and the individual's
civilization,
personality and
to which
socialization
different
in a community
peoples,
where
nations,
where
countries
religion is very
contribute.
important. Of course, this
And we
is going
have
to
local
be
cultures, and that
going
is in
to
each
have an
country,
impact and have an
for each
influence
people, for
on
each
the
nation.
individual's
There
ideas
is
and
a
individual's
specific culture,
personality
and
and
sometimes
how
even
they
a
see
number of cultures
things and
coexisting
how they
within one
see others.
geographical
So
space.
this is what the
We'll see
meso
this in clearer
system
terms
is.
later on. But the main idea
Next
which
is
I'd
the
like you to
exosystem. The
bear in
exosystem,
mind
as
here is what we
explained
will
here
be
on
discussing
slide
is
number
this
8,
idea
is
that
that
although
layer
we
which defines
have
the
different
larger
cultures,
social system
and that means that we have
within
different
which the
ways
child
of
or the individual
dealing with
grows.
things, with the
And
daily things in life. We have
the
different
structures in this
values,
layer
we have
also
different norms, we
impact
have
the
different
child's
ways of
development
life,
by
yet we
interacting with
still
some
share
structure
many
in
things
the
as
microsystem.
nations,
That
as
is, and
peoples,
here
that
we're
make
going to
us
take an
one,
example. That
actually
is, for
one
instance, the parent
human
workplace,
kind, one
which is
human
part
race.
of the exosystem. That is because why exo?
Right.
Because it is exogenous to the
As you can see
individual
on
or
this
to the child.
slide 2,
The child or the
the
individual
specific
has
title
no
of
connection,
this
direct
first
connection
part
to
of
the
the
parent's
lecture
workplace.
is Local
They
Cultures,
might
Universal
never go there.
Civilization, e
They might
pluribus
not
unum.
even
E
know
pluribus
what the
unum is a
parents
Latin
do
expression that
exactly.
means
Still,
out, one out of many.
that parent
And
workplace
I used
can
this
have an
Latin
indirect
expression
influence
to
on
illustrate
the
actually
child's
the first part of the title,
development,
Local Cultures, Universal
because
Civilization,
the way
which
parents
means
live
the
within
following
that workplace, the
idea,
problems of
which
that
I would like
workplace, the
to
positive and
emphasize in this
negative
lecture,
aspects of
and
that
which, of course,
workplace,
you can
are going to influence the
oppose.
parents and the parents'
You
behavior
have
and the parents'
all
comportment when
approaches
they get
to
back
cultures
home.
and
And
civilization,
this
and
has an
many scholars
influence
think
on
that we have
the
many
child
civilizations, and
and
we've
the
had many
teenager and the
civilizations, and then
individual.
in one
So
particular
the
epoch you can have
exosystem
different
is that
civilization
layer, that
coexisting.
environment
The
that
idea
is
that I've been
far,
trying to
at
advance
least
here
physically,
is
far
that
from the individual.
actually there
They
is
might not even have
in
any
one epoch, in
contact,
one
any physical contact
span of
to
time,
that
there
environment.
is one
Still, that
civilization, one
environment
human civilization,
has an
to
influence
which
on
different
the
peoples,
microsystems.
nations,
Remember,
countries
part of the
contribute.
microsystems is
And
the
we
family.
have local cultures,
That
and
is
that is in
the
each
parents.
country, for each
And
people, for each
the
nation.
parents work
There
in
is
some
a
place,
specific
and
culture,
that
and
workplace
sometimes
is going
even
to have an
a number
indirect
of cultures
impact
coexisting
on
within one
the individual
geographical
through
space.
the
We'll
parents.
see this in clearer
So that's
terms
why, even
later on.
if the individual
But the main
has
idea which
no
I'd like you to
physical contact
bear in
with
mind
their
here
parents'
is what
workplace,
we will be
still
discussing
the
is this
workplace is
idea that
going to influence
although
their
we
development,
have
is
different
going to influence
cultures,
their
and
personality,
that means that we have
their
different ways of
socialization,
dealing with
their
things, with the
culture,
daily things in
because
life. We
that
have
there is that
different
link, which is
values,
the
we have
parent,
different
that is
norms,
the
we have
micro
different
system,
ways of life,
one of the micro
yet
system.
we still
So
share many things.
that's why
as
Bronfenbrenner
nations, as
integrated
peoples,
the
that
layer
make us
beyond
one, the
actually one
mesosystem,
human
which is the exosystem,
kind,
because
one human
it still
race has an influence on the individual.
right.
Now, on a larger scale,
As you can see on this
is
slide 2,
the
specific title of
larger
this
environment,
first part
the
of
wider
the lecture
environment that is going to go
local
beyond
cultures,
the
universal
individual,
civilization,
beyond the
e
family,
pluribus unum.
beyond
E
that
pluribus unum is a
immediate
Latin expression that means
environment of an individual
out
is the
one
macro
out of
system,
many.
as opposed
And
to the
I
micro
used this Latin
system that we have
expression
seen,
to
number
illustrate
one.
actually
And this
the
is
first part of the title,
actually
local cultures,
is
universal
comprised
civilization,
of cultural
which
values, the whole
means
culture.
the
that
following
is
idea, which I would like
that
to emphasize in
is
this lecture,
actually
and
the
which of
mainstream
course you
culture
can
of the community,
oppose,
of the country, of the
you
nations, the
have
customs,
all
the laws, the legal
approaches
system.
to cultures and
And
civilization,
this, of
and
course,
many scholars think
includes
that
the
we have
effects
many
of larger
civilizations and we've
principles
had many
defined by the
civilizations, and then
macro system.
in one
That is,
particular
in
epoch
a
you can
nation,
have
in a
different
society,
civilization
you have a
coexisting.
larger culture,
The
you
idea
have
that I'm
principles, you
trying
have
to
laws,
advance
and
here
these,
is
you have beliefs, you have a
that
belief system
actually
that
there
is
is
represented through different
in
institutions,
one
those
epoch, in
religious
one
institutions, for instance, like the
span of
mosque or the
time,
church. And
there
these
is
are going
one
to have
civilization, one
also,
human
as
civilization,
well, a
to
great
which
influence
different
on the individual's
peoples,
personality
nations,
and
countries
socialization and the
contribute,
way they see
and
things.
we have local cultures,
And
that
it
is
is
in each
important
country,
because
for
not only
each
because they
people,
have
for
that
each
direct
nation,
influence on the
there is
individual, but
a
also it has
specific
an
culture,
influence
and
on the
sometimes
different
even
layers
a
that
number of
precede the macro
cultures
system,
coexisting
whether
within one
the
geographical space.
micro system or the
We'll see this in
exosystem or
clearer
the
terms
mesosystem.
later on.
For instance, here,
But the main idea which
take
I'd
an
like you
example
to
of the
bear in mind here
one
is
belief,
what we will be discussing is
one
this idea that
principle
although
in a
we
culture.
have different
Here,
cultures,
if in a
and
culture
that
we
means that
believe
we
that
have different
the
ways
parents
of
should be
dealing
solely
with
responsible
things,
for
with the
raising
daily
their
things
children,
in life. We
so
have
that
different
society
values, we have different
that
norms, we
holds
have
this
different
culture
ways of
in
life,
which we
yet
believe
we
that
still
parents
share
are
many
solely
things
responsible for
as
raising their children,
nations,
that
as
society
peoples,
is going
that make us
is less
one,
likely to
actually
provide
one
resources to help
human
parents.
kind,
If
one
in a
human
society we believe that
race.
it is the parents' job to take care of their children, it
Right.
is their responsibility as soon as and
As
as
you can
long
see on
as
this
they have
slide
decided
2,
to have children,
the specific
parents
title
are
of
the sole
this
responsible
first
and
part
providers
of the lecture
for their children.
is local
So
cultures,
this
universal
society is
civilization,
going
e
to
pluribus unum.
consider
E
that
pluribus unum is a
these
Latin
children are
expression that
not
means
the responsibility of the society,
one
that is
out of
of the
many.
government, but of the
And
parents.
I use this
So
Latin expression to
this
illustrate actually the first part of the
has,
title, local
of
cultures,
course,
universal
consequences.
civilization,
In this
which
particular society,
means
you will have
the following
fewer institutions that are
idea,
going
which
to
I would like
help the
to
parents.
emphasize in this lecture, and
Whether
which,
in
of
a
course,
society where
you
we
can
believe that
oppose,
educating children,
you
raising children,
have
is
all
not the sole job of the
approaches to
parents,
cultures and
that the parents have
civilization, and
a
many scholars
partial
think
responsibility.
that we have many
That means that the
civilizations and we've
parents are not
had
going to
many
have full
civilizations,
authority
and
on their
then
children.
in one
The society
particular
is going to
epoch you can
provide
have different
institutions
civilization coexisting.
that
The idea
are
that
supposed
I'm
to
trying
take
to advance here
in
is
charge the
that
rest of that
actually there
responsibility.
is
And
in
for
one
instance,
epoch,
this is
in
the job
one
of the school.
span of
All
time,
societies
there is one
consider
civilization,
that
one
in
human
terms
civilization,
of education, not
to
in terms
which
of upbringing, not in
different
terms of raising children,
peoples, nations,
providing
countries
food
contribute,
and
and
clothes.
we have
Now,
local
in terms of
cultures that
education,
is in
that
each
is
country,
teaching
for each people,
children
for each nation.
instruction,
There
providing
is
instruction.
a specific
This is not
culture,
the
and
parents' job.
sometimes even
So the
a number
society
of cultures
provides an
coexisting
institution,
within one
the school, which is
geographical
going to
space.
take
We'll see this in clearer
in charge
terms
this aspect.
later on.
Imagine
But the main
in a
idea which
society,
I'd like you to
there is a society where
bear in mind here
education
is what we will
is
be
not
discussing is this idea that
is considered
although
as
we
the
have different
parents'
cultures,
responsibility.
and
So
that means that we have
they would
different
not build
ways of
schools
dealing
because they
with
consider
things,
that this
with the
is the
daily
parents'
things in
job.
life.
So it's up to
We
the
have
parents to
different
educate their children.
values, we have different
And this is, for
norms,
instance, what
we have different ways of
happens
life,
in some small
yet we
communities,
still share
tribes,
many
for
things
instance, and this is what used to
as
be the case
nations, as
in the
peoples,
past, where you
that
had
make us
communities, small
one,
communities, that consider
actually
that
one
educating
human
children is
kind, one
part of the
human
families and part of
race.
the parents' responsibility. So you don't have schools, you don't have
Right.
institutionalized schools for all children of the
As you can see
community
on
or of the
this
society.
slide 2,
So this is very important.
the
So
specific title
it is in
of
this
this
way,
first part
as
of
you see here
the
on this
lecture
slide, the last paragraph,
is
the
Local
parents' ability
Cultures,
or
Universal
inability
Civilization, e
to
pluribus
carry
unum.
out that
E pluribus
responsibility
unum is
toward
a
their child
Latin
within the
expression that
context of the
means
child's microsystem is likewise
out,
affected.
one out of
Take,
many.
for example,
And I
the
use this Latin
society, in some
expression to
societies, we consider
illustrate
that
actually
feeding children
the
is
first
the
part of the
parents'
title, Local
responsibility.
Cultures, Universal
So, in
Civilization,
poor families,
which
there are children
means the
who
following
suffer from
idea, which I would like to emphasize in
from
this
a
lecture,
lack of
and
food.
which, of course, you can
So, and this
pose,
has an
you
influence on their
have
growing, on their
all
biology, and
approaches to cultures and
also they
civilization,
have this
and
has an influence on
many
their
scholars think
socialization
that we have
and on
many
their
civilizations, and we've
personality.
had
And
many
because in this
civilizations, and
society we
then
consider this is
in
the
one
parents' job,
particular
so
epoch
you
you
don't
can
have
have different
institutions
civilization
which are
coexisting.
going to
The
control
idea that
that
I'm
aspect,
trying to advance
and
here is
this has an
that
impact, a
actually
consequence.
there is,
While in societies
in
where
one
we believe
epoch,
that
in
it is
one
only partly
span of
the
time,
responsibility of the
there is
parents,
one
you will have
civilization, one
institutions.
human
That is, you would have
civilization,
social
to
services
which
that are going to
different
go, for instance, to
peoples,
houses
nations,
to see
countries contribute.
if children are well
And we
fed.
have local
And
cultures,
at
and that is
school,
in each
there are
country,
social
for
services,
each
and
people,
the
for
school
each
also
nation,
has
there is a
social
specific
service that is
culture,
going to
and
check whether
sometimes even
these
a number of
the
cultures
children,
coexisting within
the
one
school boys and the school
geographical
girls
space.
are well fed.
We'll
And
see
if
this
this is
in
not the
clearer
case,
terms
they're going to see whether
later on.
the parents, it's because
But the
of
main
the
idea which I'd
parents who
like you
are
to
irresponsible, or because the
bear
parents
in
do not
mind
have the
here
means,
is
in
what
which
we will be
case they
discussing is
will
this idea that although
refer
we
to
have different
the social
cultures, and that
services
means that we
which
have
are
different
going to
ways of
provide
dealing with
better
things, with
means
the daily
for
things in
the
life.
parents,
We have
or
different
sometimes even when
values,
some
we have
parents cannot
different
take care of their
norms,
children,
we have
the
different ways
children
of
are
life,
taken away from
yet
the
we
parents,
still
and it is
share
the
many
government, it
things
is
as
the
nations,
society
as
which
peoples,
takes care
that
of the
make
children.
us
So you
one,
see
actually
how
one
the macro
human
system can
kind, one
have
human
a
race.
direct influence on the individual's development and individual's
Right.
socialization.
As you can see on this slide 2,
Now,
the specific
last
title of
layer,
this first part of the
which, as I said
lecture
earlier, it is a sort of
is Local
transversal
Cultures,
environment.
Universal Civilization.
It is
E
the
pluribus
time.
unum. E pluribus
We
unum is
can
a Latin
simply
expression
call
that
it
means
the time, the epoch
out, one
within
out of
which
many.
the
And
individual
I
grows,
use this Latin
and
expression to
that
illustrate
determines
actually
also the
the
functioning of the
first part of
other
the title, Local
systems, of the
Cultures,
other
Universal Civilization,
layers.
which
When you
means
grow
the
in the
following
19th century, and when you
idea,
grow in the
which
20th
I
century,
would
and when you
like
grow in the
to
21st century,
emphasize in this
this, of
lecture,
course, is
and
not
which
the
of
same.
course you can
All the environments are going to
pose,
be influenced by
and
that.
you
Look now,
have
for instance,
all
with
approaches
social
to
media.
cultures and
We are in
civilization, and
21st century.
many
We have
scholars
social
think
media. The
that
fact that we
we
grow
have
in
many
this particular
civilizations, and we've
epoch,
had
in this
many
particular
civilizations,
time,
and then
this is
in one
going to
particular epoch you
influence
can have
the
different
functioning
civilization
of all the
coexisting.
other
The
environments.
idea that I'm
On this
trying
slide, we
to
have,
advance
for
here
instance,
is
this example of the timing
that
of a
actually there
parent's
is
death.
in one
Whether
epoch,
your
in one
parent
dies
span of
at
time, there
for
is
instance,
one
at a particular
civilization,
age,
one
when you are a
human
child, or when you are a
civilization,
teenager, or when you are
to
an adult.
which
This
different
is going to
peoples, nations,
influence
countries
greatly your
contribute,
personality and your
and we have
development.
local
So
cultures, and that is in
whether
each
things
country,
occur,
for
whether
each
things
people, for
happen
each
now
nation,
or later,
there is
earlier or
a
later,
specific
this
culture,
is
and
going to
sometimes
have a great
even a
impact
number
on
of cultures
your
coexisting within
immediate
one
environment and the
geographical
other
space.
different environments that have
We'll
an
see this in
impact
clearer terms
on your development
later
and
on.
on your growing.
But the
And
main idea
all
which I'd like
these
you to
environments, whether the
bear in mind
microsystem,
here is
the
what we will be discussing is this
mesosystem,
idea that
the
although
exosystem,
we
or the
have different
macrosystem,
cultures,
or the
and that
chronosystem,
means that we have
each one
different
of
ways
these
of dealing with things, with
impact
the daily
your
things in
development,
life.
your
We
personality,
have
your view of
different
the world,
values,
your
we
view
have
of the
different
other.
norms, we
Uh,
have different ways of life,
in your
yet
microsystem,
we
if your
still
parents
share
believe
many
that
things
you
as
are
nations,
you
as
belong to
peoples,
that family,
that
and
make
that
us
as a
one,
member of that
actually
family
one
you cannot
human
have a relationship
kind,
with
one
people
human
who come from
race.
that particular family or that particular ethnic group. This
Right.
is going to determine your view of the other.
As you can
For
see on
you,
this
the
slide,
other
slide
will
2,
be
the
can
specific
be the
title
neighbor,
of this
can be
first
the
part
member
of
of that
the
family
lecture
that
is
actually is
Local
related to
Cultures,
you.
Universal
But
Civilization, e
if
pluribus unum. E
in
pluribus
that
unum is a
family
Latin
you believe
expression
that
that
there is
means
no difference between you and the others,
out,
so the
one
others are
out of
going to
many.
consider them as not
And
the other,
I
as
use
part
this
of you,
Latin
as part of
expression
your
to
community.
illustrate
So all
actually
of these
the
layers,
first
all
part of
of
the
these
title, Local
environments
Cultures,
have a
Universal
direct
Civilization,
impact on how
which
you view the other,
means
how you
the
establish
following
relationships
idea,
with the
which
other.
I would like
And this brings me
to
back to the
emphasize in
first
this lecture,
slide,
and which,
to
of
which is the
course,
third
you
actually,
can
when we mentioned
oppose,
Jean-Paul
and
Sartre,
you
who says
have
hell
all
is the other, and in the
approaches
second
to
quotation
cultures and
considers that
civilization,
the
and
other
many
is
scholars
important,
think
is a
that
mediator
we have
to
many
see, to
civilizations, and
know
we've had
yourself,
many
to know who
civilizations,
you
and then
are.
in
So
one
in one
particular
case
epoch
it
you can
is
have different
negative, in
civilization
the other it is
coexisting.
positive.
The idea that
This
I'm
is
trying to
influenced
advance here
by
is
the
that
different
actually
environments
there
that
is
we have
in
seen, we
one
have just
epoch,
seen,
in one
and this is what makes you
span of
develop
time, there
a
is
form
one
of
civilization, one
representation,
human
a concept that we're
civilization,
going to see
to
next time,
which
and
different
that is going to determine
peoples, nations, countries
your
contribute,
socialization, your
and we have local
membership within a
cultures, and
particular
that is in
society,
each
your
country,
acceptance of the
for each
values of the
people, for
society within
each
which you
nation.
grow, or your
There is
rejection
a
of those
specific
values,
culture,
because
and
individuals
sometimes even
live
a
in
number of
communities, live
cultures
in
coexisting
societies,
within
but
one
they do not react
geographical
in the
space.
same way to the
We'll see this
values
in
of these
clearer
societies,
terms
to the norms of these
later on.
societies. We have
But the
people
main idea which
who
I'd like you
actually
to
adapt and cope easily
bear in
with
mind
their
here
environment,
is
and we
what we will
have
be
people
discussing is this
who
idea that
stand
although
against
we
these
have
things,
different cultures,
and
and that
are
means that
considered
we have
as
different ways
rebels,
of
as people
dealing
who
with
reject
things,
and
with the
conceive
daily things
the
in life.
concept that
We have
expresses this
different
rejection that is
values, we have
enemy
different norms,
later
we have
in the
different ways
program.
of life,
So there are
yet
people
we
who
still
develop
share
anime, that
many
is a sort
things
of rejection of the
as
values of
nations,
their
as
society,
peoples,
while
that
others
make us one,
cope easily with
actually
those
one
same
human
values. And
kind,
sometimes
one
within the
human
same family,
race.
between brothers and sisters, you have a member of the family who
Right.
accepts certain things in the family and another one
As you can
who
see on
rejects
this
these.
slide
Why?
2,
Because
the
first there
specific
is their
title of
biology,
this first part
and
of
later there
the
is
lecture
that influence of the
is
different
Local Cultures,
environments,
Universal
these
Civilization,
ecological
e
systems
pluribus unum.
that have
E
different
pluribus unum
impacts
is
and
a Latin
influences on
expression that means
individuals. And the way we integrate these
out,
influences,
one
the
out of
way we
many.
are subjected to these
And
influences and
I
react
used
to them,
this Latin
is going
expression
to
to
make
illustrate
us
actually
different
the
in
first
some
part of
way
the title, Local
and
Cultures, Universal
alike
Civilization,
in some other
which
way. And
means
this what
the
makes a
following
society, this what
idea,
makes
which
a
I would
culture.
like to emphasize in
Thank
this
you.
lecture, and which, of
And I
course,
see you
you
next
can
time for
oppose,
further details.
you have